The Devereaux mansion had always been a place where sound lived easily, where giggles spilled down marble staircases, where soft piano notes floated through sunlit corridors, where two little girls chased each other around velvet sofas until their mother pretended to faint dramatically on the rug. But the night Elise Devereaux died, all of that changed. And the silence that followed was the kind that didn't just fill a house. It swallowed it whole. Adrian Devereaux returned from Geneva unaware that his world had already collapsed. His private jet touched down just past sunset, the city lights flickering in the distance like scattered embers. He stepped into the back seat of the waiting black Mercedes, tugging off his tie, exhausted but eager to see his daughters. He imagined Aurora's excited squeal, Belle's tiny arms thrown around his neck, Elise teasing him for always overworking. But when the car stopped at the gates of the mansion, something felt wrong. The iron gates stood open. The windows glowed dimly, as if afraid to shine. And no one, no staff, no butler, no guard, came out to greet him. The silence wasn't normal. It was unnatural. Adrian hurried inside, the echo of his footsteps the only sound in the cavernous foyer. Lamps had been left on, casting long trembling shadows across the floor. A vase lay shattered near the staircase. His breath hitched. Something had happened, he knew it with a certainty that made his stomach twist violently. He ran. "Elise?" He shouted up the stairs. "Aurora? Belle?" No answer. He pushed open the door to the master bedroom first. Empty. Sheets half-tangled, as if someone had risen quickly, too quickly. Panic clawed at his throat as he crossed the hallway to the twins' room, his hands shaking as he turned the doorknob. What he saw made his knees buckle. Aurora and Belle sat curled together on the bed, their foreheads touching, their small hands locked so tightly that their knuckles were white. Their eyes were wide, too wide. Too wide, staring at nothing, unblinking, frozen. Their dolls lay scattered across the carpet as if dropped mid-play. And Elise. Elise wasn't there. He approached slowly, terrified of frightening them. "My loves," he whispered, kneeling in front of them. "Look at Daddy. Please." Neither child blinked. Neither child breathed deeply enough to confirm they were still in the world with him. It was as though their souls had retreated somewhere far away, somewhere unreachable. A faint sound drifted behind him. He turned sharply. In the doorway stood Sophia, the head housekeeper, with tears streaming down her face. Her voice trembled so badly he almost didn't hear the words. "Mr. Devereaux. Madame Elise, she collapsed this afternoon. The ambulance arrived too late. They tried, but..." His world collapsed. His lungs emptied. The hallway seemed to tilt sideways. Elise was gone. And his daughters had witnessed everything. He rushed back to the twins, cupping their faces gently. "Girls," he whispered, voice breaking, "please talk to me. Please." But Aurora only stared past him, into the wall. Belle didn't move at all. Not a sound, not a whimper, nothing. It felt as if their voices had died with their mother. Hours later, after the coroner left and the house emptied into ghostly quiet, Adrian remained beside the twins' bed. The girls did not sleep. They did not move. They stayed pressed together like two frightened sparrows waiting for a storm that had already arrived. And as dawn crept in through the curtains, Adrian realized something that chilled him deeper than grief ever could. This was not ordinary shock. This was something else. Something carved into their hearts so deeply it had sealed their voices away. The Devereaux mansion, once full of laughter, had become a tomb. For 3 months, the Devereaux mansion remained a mausoleum of quiet. Therapists came and went like ghosts in white coats. Neurologists from Switzerland, child psychologists from Paris, trauma specialists from London, each walked through the grand doors confident they could fix what was broken. And each left shaking their heads. Aurora and Belle would not speak. Would not smile. Would not even flinch when Adrian touched their cheeks. Every night Adrian sat on the floor beside their bed, whispering stories he once told them with Elise, tales of fairies and forest kings, of stargazing adventures, of silly monsters who only liked cookies. Before, the twins had giggled until they fell asleep in his lap. Now they simply stared at the wall, wide-eyed, hollow. Dr. Heloise Martel, France's most celebrated pediatric neurologist, was the last to arrive. She examined the twins with a clinical precision that made Adrian feel like an intruder in his own home. Hours later, she delivered her verdict. Permanent trauma. Rare, but not unheard of, she said, her tone almost sympathetic. Their voices have shut down. You must prepare to raise them without speech. Prepare. As if anyone could prepare for that. The mansion transformed into a private clinic. Machines hummed through every hallway. A rotating team of specialists monitored every breath the girls took. Flashcards, sensory therapy, art therapy, music therapy, none pierced the icy quiet the twins carried inside them. Meanwhile, Adrian stopped sleeping. Stopped eating. Stopped believing in anything except the ache in his chest. Until the day Amara Hale arrived. She came from an agency that Adrian barely remembered approving. A new hire for cleaning and basic chores. The kind of position he once interviewed for personally. Elise used to insist that the home should feel like family. Now Adrian barely had the strength to look at anyone. Amara stepped through the mansion doors quietly, carrying a worn leather backpack and the kind of soft presence that didn't disturb the air. She was in her late 20s, her dark curls pulled into a loose bun, her features calm but shadowed with a sadness she never spoke of. The staff welcomed her politely, yet with a distance. Everyone here had learned not to become attached. But when Amara saw the twins for the first time, sitting rigid on the carpet, dolls untouched, something in her expression shifted. She did not step back the way most newcomers did. She did not pity them. She simply exhaled slowly, as if she recognized the shape of their silence. Later that evening, Sophia whispered in the staff kitchen, "She used to be a nurse, you know." Before, something happened. "What happened?" another staff member asked. Sophia lowered her voice. She was accused of negligence. A child under her care died. She lost everything. Adrian never heard this conversation. But even if he had, he wouldn't have cared. His mind was elsewhere, lost, exhausted, hollow. Amara moved quietly through the mansion, dusting shelves, folding linens, wiping frames that still held Elisa's smiling face. She worked delicately, as though afraid to disturb memories that were already too fragile. One morning, while cleaning the library, she paused in front of Elisa's piano. The sunlight filtered through tall windows, dust motes dancing like faint ghosts. Without thinking, Amara touched one key, just one, and the soft note floated upward like a sigh. She froze. Then she hummed, soft, low, a lullaby from her childhood in Mogadishu. A song her grandmother used to hum while braiding her hair. The melody was warm. Old. Soothing. And behind her, something shifted. Aurora lifted her head. Belle blinked slowly, focusing for the first time in months. Amara turned, startled. The twins were watching her. Really watching her. Their small bodies leaned forward just slightly, as if the sound had reached a part of them untouched by doctors, untouched by grief. For the first time in months, the silence cracked, just a hairline fracture, but enough to let a breath of hope slip through. Amara didn't smile. Didn't gasp. Didn't move closer. She simply kept humming. And the twins kept listening. From that moment in the library, something small but unmistakable shifted inside the Devereaux mansion. No one else noticed it at first. Not the therapists. Not the rotating nurses. Not even Adrian, who spent his days drowned in meetings with experts and his nights sitting beside his daughter's silent forms. But Amara noticed. She noticed how Aurora's gaze now followed her across a room. How Belle paused when Amara passed by with an armful of laundry. How the twins' shoulders, once rigid with unspoken fear, softened whenever her humming drifted into the air. Still, Amara did not push. She knew better than anyone that trauma was a skittish thing, a frightened animal hiding under a bed, easily scared back into the dark. So she stayed steady. Quiet. Present. She hummed while folding blankets. Whispered silly stories to the household plants. Pretended the vacuum was a stubborn creature who refused to cooperate. Not for the girls. Not for recognition. But because this was who she had always been before her life collapsed, gentle, warm, a presence children trusted. And slowly, the twins began hovering around her. At first, they appeared silently in doorways, tiny silhouettes clutching their dolls. Then they crept closer, curiosity fighting fear. Eventually, they followed her like two timid shadows through the hallways, never touching, never speaking, but watching her with eyes that were no longer empty. One afternoon, Adrian returned early from a meeting. Exhausted, he walked in intending to retreat to his office, but a soft sound made him freeze mid-step. The faintest giggle. His heart slammed in his chest. He wasn't sure he'd heard it, maybe exhaustion was playing cruel tricks, but he followed the sound upstairs, climbing the steps slowly, afraid that even breathing too loudly would make the moment vanish. He reached the twins' room. The door was half open. Inside, Amara sat cross-legged on the carpet, holding a tiny toy giraffe. She wasn't speaking, not a single word. Instead, she was miming an exaggerated, dramatic performance. She pretended the giraffe was too tired to stand, wobbling it side to side until it fell onto its stuffed zebra friend. Aurora's lips twitched. Belle covered her mouth, shaking with a soundless laugh. Adrian felt something inside him shatter, grief, longing, disbelief, all tangled into one unbearable ache. He leaned quietly against the wall, watching. Amara caught his eye. She paused mid-performance, unsure whether she was allowed to continue. But then Belle looked up at her with pleading eyes, as if silently asking don't stop. So Amara continued. This time, she made the giraffe perform a dramatic feint, landing with its legs in the air. Aurora gasped softly, a tiny, barely there puff of sound, but enough to make Adrian's breath catch. He clutched the doorframe until his knuckles whitened. Later that evening, Adrian found himself standing in the hallway outside the kitchen, watching Amara again. She wasn't performing this time, just stirring soup in a large pot, humming her grandmother's lullaby under her breath. The twins sat on the counter beside her, legs dangling, eyes bright with a calmness he hadn't seen in months. They still didn't speak. But their silence felt different now. It wasn't hollow. It wasn't frightening. It was curious. Alive. And for the first time since Elisa's death, Adrian felt a flicker of something like hope. He stepped forward, clearing his throat gently. Amara turned. Mr. Devereaux? He wanted to thank her, wanted to pour every ounce of gratitude he had into words, but emotion clogged his throat. All he managed was, "You seem to understand them." Amara didn't flinch. She simply replied softly, "Some wounds need presence more than treatment." Her eyes dropped for a moment, sadness brushing their depths. Before Adrian could ask about it, the twins tugged gently on her sleeve, drawing her back into their quiet world. He watched them go, Amara walking calmly, the girls trailing behind her like two fragile moons orbiting the only steady star they had left. And he realized something that terrified him. Amara Hale, a woman he barely knew, was doing what teams of specialists had failed to do. She was bringing his daughters back to life. The transformation didn't happen overnight, but it was unmistakable. Aurora and Belle, who once sat stiff as statues, now moved with a quiet curiosity. Their eyes followed Amara everywhere. They tugged gently on the hem of her shirt when they wanted her near. They curled beside her without fear, their small shoulders relaxing whenever she hummed that old lullaby. No therapist had ever achieved that. Not even close. Adrian watched this new reality with a mixture of awe and dread. He wanted to believe this was healing, wanted desperately to cling to the fragile hope Amara brought into the house, but a darker thought gnawed at him. What if the girls were depending on her too much? What if this fragile progress could break? He found himself observing from doorways, listening outside rooms, studying every interaction. Amara never tried to teach them words. She never asked them to speak. She simply built moments, tiny, warm, gentle moments, that made the world feel safe again. And the girls bloomed in that safety. One Friday afternoon, after yet another tense meeting with Dr. Martel, Adrian returned home far earlier than usual. Even as he stepped through the front door, the house felt different, lighter somehow. He followed a faint sound drifting from the second floor. It wasn't humming. It wasn't crying. It was laughter. He moved quickly, nearly tripping over the rug in the hallway, his pulse racing. He reached the twins' room and froze in the doorway. What he saw made his breath stop. Aurora and Belle were wearing tiny white doctor coats, plastic stethoscopes hanging from their necks. They stood beside Amara, who was lying flat on the floor, dramatically pretending to faint. Belle poked her cheek with the toy stethoscope. "You're sick," she whispered, her voice soft but real. We fix you," Aurora added. Their words were shaky. Fragile. Short. But they were words. Actual words. Adrian's world tilted. He choked on a breath, gripping the doorframe so tightly his fingers ached. His daughters, mute, unreachable for months, were speaking. Speaking with innocence, with imagination, with a freedom he thought had died the day Elise did. Amara noticed him first. She sat up quickly, startled. Her eyes widened, fear, guilt, and confusion flickering all at once. "Mr. Devereaux, I didn't ask them to, I'm so sorry." But Adrian didn't hear a single word she was saying. His legs moved without permission, carrying him toward the twins. He dropped to his knees in front of them, tears blurring everything. "Say it again," he whispered, voice cracking. "Please, say anything." Aurora blinked up at him. Belle touched his cheek gently, as though sensing the tremble in him. "Daddy?" Aurora murmured. He broke. A sob escaped him, raw, unrestrained, torn from the hollow place where hope had died months ago. He pulled both girls into his arms, holding them impossibly close as they rested their tiny foreheads against his neck. "I hear you," he whispered. "Oh God, I hear you." Amara stood frozen, one hand pressed against her chest. She had never expected this moment. She had never even allowed herself to imagine it. She wasn't their therapist. She wasn't their doctor. She was barely even part of the staff. But she had reached the girls in a way no one else could. As Adrian held his daughters, Amara stepped back slowly, unsure of her place. Unsure if she deserved to witness the miracle she'd helped create. Later, when the twins finally drifted into a peaceful nap, Adrian approached her in the hallway. His cheeks were still damp with tears. "How?" he asked, voice low. Amara shook her head. "They trusted me. That's all." "No," he whispered. "It's so much more." But beneath the gratitude, fear stirred inside him. If Amara could break this silence, she could break something else too. The miracle terrified him. Because now he needed her. Now the girls needed her. And Adrian Devereaux had already lost one woman he could never replace. He wasn't sure he could survive losing another. The miracle lasted only 3 days. For 3 sunlit mornings, the Devereaux mansion felt almost alive again. Aurora and Belle woke with soft words on their lips. They toddled after Amara with tiny questions, tiny laughs, tiny discoveries that made every corner of the house glow. Adrian recorded none of it, he was afraid documenting it would break the spell. Instead, he followed them quietly, memorizing each sound as though it were oxygen. But miracles are delicate things. And not everyone wanted one. On the 4th morning, Dr. Heloise Martel arrived unannounced. Adrian had not summoned her. He had not planned another evaluation. He had simply wanted to enjoy the fragile return of his daughter's voices before risking another doctor's interference. But Martel had a way of appearing exactly when she shouldn't. She swept into the mansion with her clipboard pressed tight to her chest, her thin heels tapping like a metronome of disapproval. "I heard there has been progress," she said crisply. "And I must be the one to assess it." Adrian stiffened. "Maybe another time." She didn't let him finish. Martel strode directly to the twins' room. The girls were sitting on the rug beside Amara, building a crooked tower of blocks. At the sight of the doctor, their bodies shrank inward, their tiny hands retreating into their laps. Martel's eyes narrowed. "How interesting," she murmured. "They are responsive to her?" Adrian frowned. "Yes. For reasons I can't explain." "Oh, but I can," Martel replied sharply. "Children in trauma often form unhealthy, rapid attachments. It's a psychological red flag." Amara froze, unsure whether to defend herself or stay silent. The twins scooted closer to her, small fingers clutching the edge of her shirt. Martel's gaze sharpened. "Mr. Devereaux," she said coldly, "do you even know who this woman is?" The room's warmth evaporated. Amara's hands trembled. Adrian's pulse thudded in his ears. Martel set the clipboard down with a loud, deliberate slap. "Amara Hale," she began, "was once a pediatric trauma nurse in London. She lost her license after a child in her care died due to gross negligence. Adrian's eyes widened. What? It's all documented. Martel opened a folder, one Adrian had never seen. She falsified reports. Lied about procedures. And after the death, she fled the hospital before the investigation concluded. Amara shook her head, tears forming. That's not true. I tried to explain to the board. Enough, Martel snapped. Your presence here is dangerous for these girls. Belle whimpered. Aurora grabbed Amara's hand tightly, shaking with fear. Adrian stepped forward, torn between rage and confusion. Amara, is this true? She swallowed hard. I never fled. I was dismissed before I could defend myself. The doctor responsible. Martel cut her off like a sharpened blade. She's manipulating you. And your daughters. The fear inside Adrian hardened. He had lost Elise. He had nearly lost Aurora and Belle. He could not, would not, risk losing them again. Please, Amara whispered, voice breaking, listen to me. But Adrian couldn't. Not right then. Not when every nerve inside him screamed danger. Pack your things, he said, his voice shaking but firm. You need to leave. The word struck harder than a blow. Amara's eyes filled, but she did not argue. She stood slowly, gently prying her hand free from Aurora's desperate grip. The twins cried without sound, clutching her sleeves, their tiny voices dissolving into breathless gasps. I'm sorry, she whispered to them. I'll come back if I can. But Adrian turned away, unable to bear the sight. Minutes later, she walked out of the mansion carrying her worn leather backpack, the same one she had arrived with. The heavy door closed behind her with a soft click that echoed through the entire house like a knife sinking into wood. By morning, Aurora and Belle were silent again. Not just quiet. Mute. Their voices gone as though they had never existed at all. And Adrian realized too late that he had expelled the only woman who truly understood his daughters. The silence returned to the Devereaux mansion. But this time, it felt like punishment. The silence that returned after Amara's departure was different from the silence of grief. This one was sharp. Cold. Punishing. Aurora and Belle did not cry for their missing nanny. They did not ask for her. They did not look for her. They simply shut down, as if someone had switched off the last light inside them. Adrian tried to convince himself he had made the right decision. Dr. Martel said it was necessary. The staff whispered reassurance he didn't believe. He reinstated the strict therapy schedule, filled the house with specialists once more, and forced routines the girls no longer responded to. But nothing helped. The twins' eyes lost the tiny spark Amara had coaxed back to life. Their shoulders curled inward again. Their dolls lay untouched on the floor. They refused food. Refused to sleep. Refused to lift their heads when Adrian knelt in front of them whispering desperate promises. It was grief all over again, only deeper, darker, more catastrophic. One night, long after the household had gone quiet, Adrian stood in his office with trembling hands, searching for a financial contract he desperately needed for an upcoming meeting. Papers lay scattered across the desk like fallen leaves. Frustrated, he pulled open a drawer he rarely used. A single envelope sat inside, cream-colored, sealed but crumpled at the edges. His name was written on the front in hurried handwriting. Adrian frowned. He didn't remember seeing it before. Inside, he found a thin medical report stamped with the logo of the Birmingham Child Neurology Institute. Another neurologist. Another evaluation. Dated nearly 6 months ago. His pulse kicked. Why had he never seen this? He scanned the pages, and his breath left his body in a violent exhale. Diagnosis: temporary selective mutism. Cause: trauma-induced shock. Prognosis: fully reversible. Required course: emotional safety, predictable environment, gentle social bonding, music exposure, non-clinical interaction. And at the bottom: full recovery expected within 3 to 6 months with a stable, warm caregiver. Signed, Dr. Leon Farrow. Adrian's hands shook as he flipped to the next page. A note. Report sent to Dr. Heloise Martel for follow-up delivery to Guardian. Ice flooded his veins. Martel had lied. She didn't give him this report. She didn't mention a second opinion. She didn't even hint that his daughters could recover. She told him the opposite, that their condition was permanent. Irreversible. Hopeless. But this report contradicted everything she had claimed. A sickening truth settled like poison in his gut. Dr. Martel hadn't failed them. She had sabotaged them. His daughters hadn't needed machines or specialists. They needed safety. Warmth. Predictability. They needed exactly what Amara had given them. His heart hammered against his ribs as he grabbed his phone with trembling fingers and dialed the number printed on the report. The call connected after a few rings. Dr. Farrow speaking. "This is Adrian Devereaux," he said, voice cracking. "I just found your report. Why didn't I see this earlier?" Silence. Then a long, weary sigh. "I sent everything directly to Dr. Martel," the doctor said. "She insisted she'd deliver it herself. I assumed you dismissed my recommendations." "No," Adrian whispered. "She never gave it to me." Another pause. He could almost hear the doctor's anger building through the phone. "Mr. Devereaux, your daughters were never beyond reach," Dr. Farrow said softly. "They were grieving, not broken. Their voices would have returned naturally with emotional consistency and a caregiver they trusted. Amara. It had been Amara all along. She was healing them," Adrian whispered. "And I threw her out." He sank into the nearest chair, burying his face in his hands as the weight of what he'd done crashed over him. The truth was suffocating. Martel hadn't protected the girls. She had protected herself. Her reputation. Her authority. Her control. And Adrian had believed her. Trusted her. Listened to her while his daughters suffered. He felt sick. He stood abruptly, adrenaline coursing through him. He wouldn't lose another minute. Not another breath. He ran through the mansion, heart pounding with a new kind of desperation, not fear, not grief, but a father's overwhelming need to undo the harm he'd allowed. Minutes later, he was in his car, engine roaring to life as he sped into the night. He knew exactly where he was going. He had to find Amara Hale. He had to apologize. Beg. Plead. Because his daughters needed her. And because he knew now, sickeningly, devastatingly, that he had exiled the only person who had saved them. Adrian found Amara Hale 2 hours past midnight in a narrow alleyway behind a rundown apartment building on the outskirts of Lyon. The building looked nothing like the warmth she carried. Its cracked walls and flickering lights felt wrong for someone who had healed a home with nothing but kindness. He knocked gently on her door. Silence. Then the faint sound of steps. When Amara opened the door, she froze. Her eyes were tired, bruised with sleeplessness, her hair pulled back hastily. She hadn't unpacked her worn backpack. It lay in the corner of the room exactly as she had dropped it the night she left. The moment she saw him, her body stiffened. "Mr. Devereaux," she whispered, voice barely steady. "If you came for more accusations, I have nothing." "No," Adrian said, cutting her off, breath trembling. "I came to beg." Amara blinked, stunned. He stepped inside, unable to stop the words pouring out like a dam finally breaking. "I was wrong. Every terrible thing I said to you, everything I accused you of, I was wrong. You were healing my daughters while I stood there doubting you. I found a report. A neurologist we never heard from, because Martel hid it. She lied. About everything." Amara's hand flew to her mouth. She hid a diagnosis?" "Yes." His voice cracked. "The girls weren't permanently damaged. They were grieving. They needed what you gave them." His breath shuddered. "They need you, Amara. I need you." For a moment, she said nothing. Her eyes glistened. Then, softly, "Where are the twins now?" "Worse," he whispered. Silent again. Terrified. "They keep looking at the door as if waiting for you." Tears broke down Amara's face, silent, painful. Adrian lowered his head. "Please," he murmured. "Come back with me." She hesitated, but the image of Aurora and Belle, trembling and voiceless, was stronger than her doubts. She nodded. The drive back to Paris was quiet. The girls spotted her the moment Adrian carried them downstairs. Aurora let out a choking sound, half gasp, half cry. Belle bolted forward, clinging to Amara's legs as if anchoring herself to life. For the first time in weeks, the twins made noise. Not words. Not sentences. But cries. Human, aching, real cries. And Amara held them the way she would have held her younger siblings once, steady, warm, safe. Their silence began to soften. But the world outside the mansion was about to explode. By dawn the next day, scandal erupted. Headlines splashed across every French news outlet. Disgraced nurse infiltrates billionaire's home, twins at risk. Former nurse accused in child death found living inside Devereaux estate. Dr. Martel warns, the girls are being manipulated. Photographs of Amara leaving the mansion weeks earlier, tearful, clutching her backpack, were everywhere. Her past, distorted and weaponized, had been turned into a national spectacle. Within hours, the Child Protection Council issued an emergency order. Amara Hale was forbidden contact with the twins. Police arrived at the mansion to enforce it. Aurora and Belle screamed soundlessly when officers gently pried their hands off Amara's sleeves. Their bodies convulsed with panic, small, helpless gasps tearing through their chests. Amara cried silently as the girls reached for her. Adrian snapped. "Enough," he roared, stepping between the officers and Amara. "This woman saved my daughters. You will not take her." But the order stood. Amara was escorted out once again. And once again, the house fell brutally silent. Adrian watched his daughters collapse into the floor, small shoulders shaking with soundless sobs. He realized something fierce, something unstoppable. Dr. Martel hadn't just lied. She had destroyed lives for years. And she wasn't finished. But neither was he. He was a father with nothing left to lose. And he was going to bring down the woman who had stolen his daughter's voices, and Amara's life, piece by piece, lie by lie, until the entire country saw the truth. The war had begun. The country watched as Adrian Devereaux declared war on Dr. Heloise Martel. Not a private war. Not a whispered dispute. A public, roaring fight backed by the full weight of the Devereaux empire. He hired investigators, forensic accountants, digital analysts, an army of experts determined to uncover every secret Martel had buried. What they found was worse than Adrian dared imagine. False diagnoses. Fraudulent bills. Children misdiagnosed so Martel could keep them in treatment longer. A trail of families devastated by her greed. And the worst discovery of all. Amara Hale's ruined career was built on a lie. A toddler in her care had died during an experimental treatment Martel had ordered, then Martel forged documents to blame Amara, protecting her own reputation. Adrian's fury became something primal. He brought every shred of evidence to the courts. And France watched, shocked, as the most respected pediatric neurologist in the country was exposed as a predator in a white coat. The courtroom was packed the day Martel's trial began. Cameras flashed. Journalists whispered. Families whose lives she'd destroyed sat in the front rows, clutching old medical files as if finally holding something that mattered. Adrian testified first. "She told me my daughters would never speak again," he said, voice trembling with rage. "She hid a medical report that said the opposite. She cost them 6 months of their childhood. She nearly cost them their lives." The judge listened, grave and motionless. "She destroyed Amara Hale," Adrian continued. "She falsified reports. She weaponized lies. She stole years from innocent children." Behind him, Amara sat quietly, her hands folded, her posture steady despite the tremble in her chest. Aurora and Belle sat beside her, holding her arms, refusing to let go. Martel tried to defend herself, but the truth was too loud. Too overwhelming. Too undeniable. 30 families testified. 30 stories of devastation. Martel's empire of deception collapsed under the weight of their voices. By the time the verdict was read, guilty on all counts, the courtroom was silent except for the sound of Amara's tears hitting the floor. It didn't erase the years Martel had stolen. But it returned something far more powerful. Amara's truth. The Child Protection Council lifted the order the very next day. Adrian drove straight to the council office, the twins in the back seat. Amara waited outside, nervous, hopeful, terrified. When the door opened and the girls saw her, everything inside them lit up. Aurora ran first. Belle stumbled after her. Both flung their small arms around Amara's waist, burying their faces into her coat. "Mama Mara!" Belle cried out, voice cracking. Adrian gasped. The officer gasped. Amara covered her mouth in shock. "Mama Mara," Aurora repeated, firmer this time, voice steady. "Don't go away again." Adrian swallowed hard. The words hit him with a force no court verdict ever could. Tears blurred his vision as he stepped forward. "They've been waiting for you to come home," he whispered. And so she did. Forever. Months later, the Devereaux mansion transformed into something it had never been before. Not a place of wealth. Not a place of marble and gold. A place of laughter. A place of voices. The twins thrived. They spoke freely, confidently, loudly, sometimes too loudly. But Adrian never asked them to quiet down. Not after losing their voices once. Amara didn't go back to nursing. She went somewhere better. With Adrian's support, she became the director of the Devereaux Haven, a foundation dedicated to emotional trauma recovery for children across Europe. Her methods, gentle, intuitive, heart-led, reshaped how the country viewed child healing. Children who had been silent for years found their words again. Children who had been afraid learned to trust again. And everywhere the twins went, they said the same thing proudly. She healed us. We want to heal others too. On the night of Aurora and Belle's 18th birthday, the mansion glowed with soft lights and the hum of celebration. Friends, family, volunteers, and dozens of children whose lives had been saved filled the house with joy. But the real moment came after the guests left. In the quiet. Just the four of them. The twins sat on the sofa, now young women, strong, graceful, radiant. Amara sat beside them. Adrian stood nearby, hands in his pockets, watching the three of them with a heart fuller than he knew how to hold. Aurora rested her head on Amara's shoulder. "You saved our voices," she whispered. Belle nodded. "And Daddy saved yours." Amara's eyes filled. Adrian stepped closer, voice low. "No. You all saved mine." Outside, the city lights flickered like scattered stars. Inside, a family, once shattered by silence, sat together in perfect, peaceful warmth. The world had broken them. But love had rebuilt them louder than ever.